Right. Shall we get started? I think we're at a perfect critical mass. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, my name is Deepayan Basure, and I'm the director at the United Nations Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Asia and the Pacific. It is my great privilege to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you as we convene this timely event on gender-responsive small arms control, where we explore perspectives from the Asia-Pacific region on the UN Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons and the Arms Trade Treaty. This event is organized jointly in partnership with the UN Institute for Disarmament Research, UNIDIR, and I'm honored to join forces with our distinguished colleagues, Ms. Renata Hesman-Dalacqua and Ms. Hannah Salama from UNIDIR, as we embark on this critical dialogue. Before we start, please allow me to mention a few housekeeping points to ensure a smooth event and to maximize our short time together. Kindly please mute your microphone if you are not invited to speak. Should you have any comments or questions, please use the chat box. Our dedicated colleagues are monitoring your inputs, and please also note that this webinar is being recorded. So, today's agenda comprises of two main segments. Firstly, my colleague, Ms. Ida Scarpino, along with Ms. Hannah Salama from UNIDIR, will deliver some brief presentations, focusing on the latest trends and updates on gender-responsive arms control and setting the stage for the subsequent discussions. Following these presentations, we are indeed privileged to host a distinguished panel comprising of government officials and representatives from civil society across our region. These esteemed speakers will share their insights and expertise on the topic of gender-responsive small arms control. They will also share updates on progress and reflect on the persistent challenges within their respective domains. Following the panelists' presentations, we will open the floor for questions and immediate reactions. And of course, we are very keen to hear from all of you. I eagerly anticipate our discussions and extend my sincere gratitude to each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules for your presence and participation. Now, before I pass the floor over to my colleague Ida, please allow me to briefly reflect on some of the important elements of today's event and its overarching theme. Now, we are all aware of the multifaceted challenges posed by the proliferation and misuse of small arms and light weapons. These challenges are not gender neutral. They have distinct and differential impacts on women and men, boys and girls. Men predominantly constitute firearms owners and are also the perpetrators and victims of firearms-related violence. Women are often at greater risk of intimate partner violence. Cultural norms around the world frequently associate the possession and use of firearms with expressions of toxic masculinity. Disarmament and arms control forums, unfortunately, remain male-dominated spaces. However, our gathering today is not merely an acknowledgement of these challenges. It is about actively seeking solutions. By fostering gender-responsive approaches to arms control, we aim to address the root causes of violence, contribute to the effective implementation of key global instruments, and ultimately contribute to peace and security. At the heart of our discussions today are two cornerstone instruments: the United Nations Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons, better known as the PoA, and the Arms Trade Treaty, or the ATT. Now, these two agreements provide us with a set of tools to strengthen effective and secure weapons management, to counter illicit diversion, and to promote transparency, accountability, and cooperation in arms control efforts. However, full implementation of these two agreements depends, in large part, on our capacity to consider the complex nature of weapons and to carefully recognize and address their gender dimensions. As you are aware, states convene every 6 years to assess progress made in the implementation of the PoA. 2024 marks the year where the fourth review conference of the UN Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons is scheduled in June in New York. Now, this meeting will provide a platform for all of us to reflect on the successes and to address the areas that remain partially addressed or indeed insufficiently understood, such as gender mainstreaming. Now, just a few weeks ago, many of us, and I'm really thrilled to see so many familiar faces today, came together in Kathmandu for a preparatory meeting for the upcoming review conference. During this meeting in Kathmandu, we collectively identified a number of region-specific issues. Amongst them, We discussed the gendered nature of small arms and light weapons and their impact on sustainable development. While progress has been made in integrating small arms issues into development frameworks with increasing attention to gender and alignment with complementary agendas such as women, peace, and security, it's fair to say that challenges persist. These remain a significant lack of capacity and knowledge in fully understanding, capturing, and addressing the gender provisions and commitments embedded in the POA process. Aligning with them, with the sustainable development agendas as other frameworks on gender equality remains a work in progress. Now, one of the primary obstacles we discussed in Kathmandu was a lack of data and the limited access to capacity building opportunities for enhancing data collection, gender analysis, gender programming, and indeed, gender disaggregated data. Similarly, challenges are evident in the Arms Trade Treaty process. While the ATT represents a groundbreaking, legally binding instrument that links the arms trade with the risk of gender-based violence, its practical application remains insufficient. And with the 10th Conference of States Parties scheduled this summer for Geneva, our discussions today are therefore timely and essential. So today's event offers us an opportunity to reflect on these persistent challenges and to develop concrete recommendations and examples based on your extensive expertise on the ground and your understanding of regional and national challenges. I am therefore very confident that today's event will serve as a catalyst for meaningful dialogue, leading to concrete recommendations and examples drawn from your collective expertise and on-the-ground insights that will help us prepare for the global meetings on the POA and the ATT later this year. As we navigate the diverse array of perspectives and experiences from the Asia-Pacific region, I encourage all of you to actively engage and share your insights. I thank you once again for all of your attention, and I'll now hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Ida Scarpino, for the following session. Ida, over to you.
Thank you, Deep. Before I start, can you all see my screen and my presentation in presentation mode? Can you? Yes. Okay, good. So first of all, thank you, Deep, for your kind introduction. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Ida Scarpino. I'm Political Affairs Officer at UNRCPD, covering the portfolio on conventional arms. And I'm delighted to be here with you among colleagues and friends, and as I see so many familiar faces. So as Deep mentioned, before we delve into the panel discussion, I and Hannah from UNIDIR would like to introduce you the topic of today and provide you with some elements for discussion. I will focus on the gender considerations of the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms Light Weapons and how this instrument has progressively integrated gender within its mechanism. Right. So by means of introduction, the Programme of Action, the PoA on Small Arms Light Weapons, was adopted in 2001 by the UN General Assembly as a politically binding instrument and established a normative framework for small arms and light weapons control. Under the PoA, states agreed to improve national small arms regulations, covering a broad spectrum of issues, including regulatory framework, laws, import-export control, and stockpile management, among others. In 2005, states also adopted the International Tracing Instrument, which requires states to ensure that weapons are properly marked and that records are kept. Moreover, the ITI provides a framework for cooperation in weapons tracing, fulfilling one of the commitments governments made in the PoA. And this is why PoA and ITI are now part of the same process. And improving weapons tracing is also now part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So the gender impact of small arms light weapons issues was recognized as the inception of the PoA. However, in a very light manner, I would say. The text adopted in 2001 makes only one reference to gender, expressing concern about the negative impact of the illicit trade in small arms light weapons on women and the elderly in its preamble, and also recognizing the grave impact on children. However, in the past decades, we have seen a growing recognition that implementing small arms regulatory instruments and other relevant global frameworks, such as the Firearm Protocol, the Arms Trade Treaty, states must take into account the gender dimension on small arms-related weapons issues, because this has proven to be vital to the implementation processes. And therefore, within the POA process, states committed to systematically integrate this approach. As you may know, states meet every 2 years to discuss the implementation of the POA and ITI, and every 6 years to review progress. And progress on the inclusion of gender perspective into small arms-related weapons control has been made over the past POA meetings. In the 2016, 2018, 2021 POA meetings, the biennial meeting of states, states have made considerable progress on the issue of gender and have committed themselves to a series of actions. And these are increasing understanding of the gender-specific impact of the illicit trade in small arms-related weapons, promote the equal, full, meaningful, and effective participation and representation of women. And this actually is the most recent language adopted during BMS 8 in 2022. Collect disaggregated data disaggregated by sex, age, and disabilities, as also mentioned during BMS 8. Seriously consider increased funding for policy and programs that take account of the differing impacts of illicit small arms-related weapons on women, men, girls, and boys. Exchange national experiences, lessons learned, and best practices on mainstreaming gender dimension into policies and programs and law. Ensure coordination on the implementation of the POA between relevant national authorities, including those working on the POA, on women, peace and security, on gender equality, and other complementary agenda. And last but not least, harmonize national policies, including action plan on small arms-related weapons, with other national action plan, for instance, on women, peace and security, or gender equality. Moreover, in 2018, states recognized for the first time that eradicating the illicit trade in small arms-related weapons is a key part of combating gender-based violence. And this notion was expanded in 2021 to include reference to sexual violence in conflict. So aside from the progress made at the global level, national implementation remains uneven. So states are requested to submit the voluntary national reports on the implementation of the POA ITI every 2 years. Reporting templates have included gender-related questions since 2018 to reflect the commitments that states have made in recent biennial meeting of states. In 2022, out of the 93 states that reported on the implementation efforts at the global level, only 13 have been submitted by Asia-Pacific states. Out of 13 states that submitted the report in our region, 4 reported on work to mainstreaming gender into the implementation efforts, and 6 reporting having promoted the full, equal, and effective participation and representation of women in policymaking, planning, and implementation. And only 5 reported having collected disaggregated data. So data collection continues to pose significant challenges in implementing the gender provision of the POA, and globally, only 30% of countries have reported collecting disaggregated data. So this is actually a challenge not only for our region, but also at the global level. And this is why discussion on gender mainstreaming are expected to feature prominently at the upcoming 4th Review Conference on the POA to be held in June in New York. So taking into account the commitments by states on gender mainstreaming and also the persistent challenges, UNRCPD between 2019 and 2022 implemented a global project in support of gender mainstreaming policies in line with the Women, Peace and Security agenda with funding from the European Union. And as part of this project, UNRCPD conducted several activities such as trainings, baseline assessment, review of small arms-related policy and legislation from a gender perspective, and developed guidelines and training material. And as a follow-up to this project, UNRCPD is currently running a standalone project in support of the full implementation of the POA, which has 3 main pillars. And the third pillar has a dedicated set of activities that focus on gender mainstreaming. And this webinar is being organized as part of the third pillar of this project. As part of this project, which also supports the preparatory work for the 4th Review Conference as part of the pillar number 1, UNRCPD co-hosted with the government of Nepal a preparatory meeting for Asia-Pacific states in Kathmandu in the lead up to the fourth review conference, so from 23 to 25 January. So we gathered 85 participants, 31 women, 54 men, including government officials from 23 countries, civil society representatives, and officials from relevant UN agencies, and we also had the OSCE represented. Among the key topics that are expected to be considered at the fourth review conference and that have been discussed in Kathmandu, a number of cross-cutting issues have also been discussed, such as the negative impact small arms have on sustainable development and the gender nature of small arms and weapons issues. And as Deep also mentioned, several cross-cutting challenges hindering progress on this front were highlighted. So there remains a divide between the gender community and small arms and weapons community, hindering a comprehensive approach. There is a gap in our understanding of armed violence and its specific gender consequences. There is inadequate investment and capacity building on the implementation of the gender provision of the PoA. And last but not least, women are still disproportionately underrepresented in discussion and decision-making processes related to small arms control, limiting diverse perspective and comprehensive solution. For instance, at the regional preparatory meeting in Kathmandu, we only had 31 women out of 85 participants. In general, at the PoA meetings, we only have an average of 30% of women's representation. On a positive note, the president-designate of the fourth review conference is a woman for the first time, namely Ambassador Marisa Chan, who also came to Kathmandu. And in fact, the regional meeting had the benefit of having two powerful women, the Ambassador Chan and also the High Representative Izumi Nakamitsu, High Representative for Disarmament Affairs and Undersecretary General. So at the regional meeting, throughout group discussions and expert presentation, several key areas for action were identified to advance in this domain at the national level. And the key areas of action are implementing focused training programs and capacity building on gender, prevention of armed gender-based violence, particularly targeting security and defense forces, data collection, strengthening coordination among national agencies to streamline data collection efforts, encouraging cooperation among national agencies working on converging agenda, develop measurable targets and indicators online with relevant agendas such as SDGs and women, peace and security, engaging gender experts in small arms control programming, and also enhancing national reporting practices to assess progress with gender mainstreaming efforts. And then we also highlighted a few key areas for action at the regional and global level. And these include developing a structured approach for international cooperation and assistance to address implementation gaps. Of course, this referred to the full implementation of the PoA, but also could be used to bridge gender-related gaps, advocating for region-specific cooperation, experience sharing, and peer-to-peer reviews to foster collaborative approaches, leveraging existing mechanisms, training center, technical expertise, and other resources under sustainable development frameworks and also under the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And these include the leveraging regional action plan, for instance, ASEAN as a regional action plan on women, peace and security, regional roadmap. We discuss about the regional roadmap on arms regulation for South Asia, Southeast Asia states. This roadmap has also a component on gender. And then last but not least, another point was to align the implementation of the program of action with global frameworks on international humanitarian law. So I hope this information was useful and that I provided food for thoughts for the subsequent discussions. And without any further ado, in the interest of time, I thank you for your attention, and I will now give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Hannah Salana from UNIDIR, who will focus on the arms trade treaty process. Thank you.
Thanks, Ida, for this presentation and for your introduction. It's really an honor to be with you all today and share some of our thoughts and ideas for action in the context of gender-responsive small arms control, but specifically in the context of the Arms Trade Treaty. So as Ida said, my name is Hannah Salama, and I'm a researcher at UNIDIR, focusing on conventional arms control and gender. So just to get right to it, I wanted to just mention a few things about the Arms Trade Treaty. As you know, it's an international treaty that regulates international trade of conventional arms and seeks to prevent and eradicate the illicit trade and diversion of conventional arms. And the treaty also has a strong aspect of preventing human rights abuses and grave violations of IHL. It covers 8 categories of conventional weapons, so it's broader than small arms, but it also includes small arms and light weapons. And as Dipian said, it's the first legally binding treaty to contain a specific provision that is meant to address gender-based violence. So in that sense, it breaks new ground and it puts gender really at the forefront of the treaty as well. The treaty has 113 states parties so far, and 12 are in the Asia Pacific region. So just to kind of take a step back and look a little bit at the data we do have on the linkages between small arms and light weapons and gender-based violence. Now, there are a lot of challenges in collecting this data, but there are research institutes such as UNIDIR, and the Small Arms Survey has done some work in this regard. So we know that the majority of victims of firearms related deaths are men, but women are more at risk of facing specific types of armed violence. Women and girls constitute the majority, 64%, of intimate partner violence or family-related homicide. And these are statistics from UNODC from 2020. Now, when we talk about femicides, which is the intentional killing of a woman, small arms and light weapons are used in almost a third of cases, and this is data from 2018. The Small Arms Survey has updated this database, and it showed that in places where femicides are the highest, such as in the Americas, firearms are used in almost half of the incidents there. So we see a very strong linkage here between firearms and gender-based violence. In 2023, UNIDIR published a report on addressing conflict-related sexual violence through arms control and disarmament. And in 6 countries where data was available on conflict-related sexual violence, we saw that 70 to 90% of incidents involved a firearm. So a very strong correlation here between the proliferation of small arms and light weapons and the incident of conflict-related violence. And I invite you to also check out this report. We explain the sort of direct and indirect linkages that the proliferation of small arms has on CRSV. And it's also very good to see that last year, the UN PoA also addresses the issue of conflict-related sexual violence. Now, as I said, the Arms Trade Treaty under Article 7.4 requires states to carry out risk assessments on the risk that exported arms or related items can be used to commit or facilitate serious acts of gender-based violence. So this is the main provision on gender-based violence under the ATT. And in addition, under other articles, it also requires states to look at mitigation measures. And so these are provisions that together try to address gender-based violence. And this was right at the beginning of the treaty, and it was included in the treaty. Following this, the 5th Conference of State Party under the Latvian president was under this theme of gender and gender-based violence in the context of the Arms Trade Treaty. And during that conference, which was really important, states adopted decisions and recommendations on gender-based violence and representations in the treaty. Data collection on understanding the gendered impacts of armed violence, and strengthening the implementation of the GBV-related risk assessment. And since CSP5, gender has always been discussed during review conferences, but we not so much as a main focus. And this is why the work that we do, we try to bring it always to the forefront, because since that time, since it kind of lost a little bit of momentum, and we're experiencing some challenges in this regard. First of all, one of the main challenges that we have is that no state party has until now publicly denied an arms exports on the ground that the potential weapons could be used to commit or facilitate gender-based violence. So there's a little bit here, a lack of understanding of how the gender-based risk assessment criteria is being used by exporting parties, or if it's being considered at all. During discussions and research with export licensing officers, they often cite the lack of specific data that links arms with gender-based violence as a challenge in terms of including this in their export risk assessment process. So they often say, well, we don't have exact data on how arms are committing or facilitating gender-based violence. So we tend to not look at this issue when we are evaluating risks for arms exports. There's also a lack of understanding and awareness on what mitigation measures can be for gender-based violence. And as Ida said, similarly to the UN PoA, given the sort of technical nature of some of the discussions around the ATT, women are often underrepresented in official meetings. So on average, UNIDIR has looked at women's representation in the Conference of State Parties, and we see that only 34% of the diplomats there that are represented are women. And as I said, in technical roles, UNIDIR has also conducted research in 2021 on weapons and ammunition technical roles. And here I'm very keen to hear from the Ministry of Defense of India, but we saw that women are even more underrepresented, constituting a small minority of those trained in WAM technical roles. So at that time, we looked at 156 trainings on WAM, and we saw that only 12% of women were being trained in these roles. So moving on, some ideas to address some of the challenges that I mentioned. I think that really at a national level, whether states are party to the ATT or not, strengthening disaggregated data collection mechanisms on gender-based violence and including means of harm is a really important action that all states can take, and really focusing on linking, also having that information on the means of harms and the type of weapons. Then also including inclusive participation, as Ida mentioned, is also really important in the context of the ATT. But specifically, also when it comes to formulating national or regional small arms policy, including survivors and their representative organizations, whether it's GBV or CRSV survivors, I think can be a real game changer here in terms of really getting across to policymakers the impacts that the illicit proliferation and diversion of these weapons can have. And then finally, enhancing the visibility of women technical experts in weapons and ammunition roles, engaging with them meaningfully, and also bringing them to international and multilateral discussions such as the ATT and the UN PoA. And if we look specifically towards action that ATT state parties can take ahead of the Conference of State Parties, this year, the 10th Conference of State Parties, and also the 10th anniversary of the treaty. We can say that Argentina has proposed a collection of national practices to prevent gender-based violence, supporting this proposal, sharing national practice on collecting gender disaggregated, gender-based violence, and also mitigation measures and policies would be really important. Supporting the work of the ATT working group on treaty implementations on initiatives to create guidance on preventing weapons facilitated gender-based violence would also be really important. So just next week in the preparatory meeting, they will be discussing the work of the working group on treaty implementation. And this is something that states parties from the region can also support, that the sub-working group really looks at starting a process on creating guidance to prevent weapons facilitated gender-based violence. And this year's theme is a really interesting one. It's interagency cooperation. And it emphasizes the importance of cooperation between national agencies, different national agencies which are involved in arms export. And I think it's also a really good opportunity to bring together national agencies who work on preventing gender-based violence, or women, peace and security, or who work on gender equality. And so one idea could be, if you're going to this Conference of State Parties, is to bring a WPS expert to your delegation, or a delegation who works from the Women's Affairs Ministry. So really encourage that interagency cooperation, and be visible about it as well. So I think that this kind of concludes my presentation. I had a couple of discussion questions, which I will also put at the end of our panel discussion. And I would really like it if the panelists could reflect on these too. You know, reflecting on the challenges with the GBV export risk assessment, what can be the modes of enhancing knowledge and information sharing about export risk assessments in the context of the ATT implementation? What you know, what can be under the theme of interagency cooperation? Who are the focal points that can be useful to exchange information with in terms of preventing gender-based violence and combating GBV? And also looking at the opportunities for greater dialogue between WPS actors, and coordination at a national level. So yeah, I'll just leave it at this now, and I'll pass it on to my colleagues, Renata Hesman-Dalacqua, who will kick off the panel presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ida and Hannah, for sharing these presentations with us. I think it's very interesting how the UN PoA and the ATT have addressed issues related to gender and provided some general guidelines for different states parties to deal with that. But you know, every country will have a different experience and address these issues from a different point of view. They will have different priorities. And so that's, I think, it's the richness of our panel, this conversation that we're going to have, is that we will hear from a number of speakers from different backgrounds, different countries, on how these issues connect with their work. I'm very pleased to be moderating this conversation. I would just like to note that we have a chat, and some colleagues have been already sharing some resources in the chat. If you have some immediate questions related to Hannah or Ida's presentation, please feel free to drop it in the chat. Otherwise, we will also have a moment for a Q&A where everybody can participate. So I would like to turn now to the first speaker in our panel discussion, which is Ms. Atikan Diloguatana, who is a diplomat from the government of Thailand, and she's based in Geneva. And Atikan, if you could tell us, what are Thailand's priorities with regards to gender and conventional arms control, and what opportunities, actions is Thailand pursuing this year in this regard?
Thank you, Renata. First of all, I wish to express my appreciation and gratitude again for organizing this very important event and then conducting us to the conversation. This is again very timely, and it is my honor to join this panel discussion with these distinguished panelists. So, well, before I'm turning to disarmament, let me share that the gender is, I think, it's instilled in the DNA of Thailand's legislation and policy, as it's also reflected in our implementation to related treaties. For example, the CEDAWs, and also we, along with the SDG goal 16.4 on disarmament, we also adhere to the SDG goal 5, which is gender equality, and also our constitution of 2011 acknowledged the necessity and needs of various groups, including women and girls, as well as other marginalized groups. It means that our government have made progress in integrating gender language in legislation and policies, including guidelines for gender responsive budget for government agency. This also applies to those agencies who are in charge with securities, defense, and interior affairs. I think this is quite important as a very turning point that all the agency, when they formulate the annual budgeting request and allocate the budget, they have to consider the gender dimension by implementing their project and the plan of work. So turning to the disarmament issue, I would like to highlight three keys, I would say, why with Thailand, when Thailand thinking about the gender policies. So we also would like to apply the gender policies to our area of our endeavors. When we talk about this, it means that we try to complement the legislation and policy on national security with people-centric effort. So we link the first pillar, like the two pillars of the UN work, which is security and human rights all together. The first of the key area is the participation. Like Hannah and Aida already mentioned, of course, we need participation and we need to increase the participation of women. But for us, the participation is served as a starting point as well to integrate gender in the endeavors. Then we look at negotiating and process in control and disarmament policies. And we also think that women are also underrepresented in that. And however, from the specific, from the statistic that we have, in the delegation of Thailand in the negotiating process, especially in this armament area, women always form majority of the delegation. We usually have more than 50. And I think the very last negotiation, the last meeting that we have in the TPNW in New York, women form 80% of our delegation, which is one of the things that we push through women empowerment, which I will touch upon later. So when the government see like the underrepresented women in that in the process, what we're trying to do is we try to engage with other partners in order just to increase the number and of course their visibilities in arms control through multiple initiatives. It means that we could go through by promoting the STEM education among young women. We could increase a number and proportion of female cadets, female investigators, and female police. We advance our effort on women empowerment in public and social life, could support women to step up the position from operational to decision-making position in disarmament and other related areas, such as international laws. Their women empowerment also play an important role in decision-making process because, for example, we have women and female agency that very active in peacemaking and conflict resolution process, in treaty negotiation, and also in legislative. They also reflect the need and necessity when we discuss about the law and at the parliament. This is one of the things that we are proud and which to encourage other countries just to try to engage different group of people to get along in that process. And the second key element, as I mentioned before, that when we talk about gender, it's not about adding or having more women. We need to use gender perspective when we think about the arms controls and disarmament proposal in formulating the policy. Therefore, the Thai government, we apply multidisciplinary and interagency approach to mainstream gender perspective in their agency activities, such as some of their government are encouraged to use gender lens on reflecting the way people of different sexual identities or expression assign the value on weapons to find a way, in order to find a way to carve the way to get rid of that weapons through some public awareness activities or any other measures. Another one is those agencies also encourage to use the gender analysis from disaggregated data that could help us to understand the situation in the field and explore the other effective ways to prevent the crime through arms controlling measures. Last but not least, at the moment, what we try to do through the awareness raising activity is just to encourage the public and also other agencies and authorities to reconceptualize the national security effort, that it could be more open and link it to the human security at the end. So this could help us to identify and maybe to expand the stakeholder that join hand preventing in arms controls and government effort. And last, I wish to lead the government at the moment we use the defensive to analyze this proportionate impact. Only not how women and men are scoring differently from the use of weapons production, and also it also disaggregated data that this speaker already say doing that. From the data that we have, we always use the data used in designing the guidelines to enhance the effectiveness of the disarmament policy. For instance, in implementing the UNSC resolution on with the WPS, Thailand adopted several measures and guidelines on women in the promotion of peace and security. This is to ensure that all relevant authorities in the field integrate all the gender lens and gender perspective into their policy with some key element. For example, the elimination of all form of violence, especially gender-based violence or domestic violence, and also access to services, ensure the access to services and redress for women and children. And also, last but not least, the women participation in decision-making process at local level and also at upper level. This is all of this effort I've just said, have to be done. It has to be done and proceeded through the cooperation with other stakeholders, and among that is international organization and also civil society, which we consider as one of the main driver of bringing the gender responsive approach in armed control efforts from international level to national level. And for us, the CSO made, I would say, they have a very progressive flow, and they are really in the field and have a very good access and conversation with the local community. And I think for your second question, it is more about what we aim to do during this year. This year, Thailand, we are a gender focal point on the Article 5 implementation on the APMBC, the Anti-Personal Mind Ban Convention. For us, this is the second time we assume this role, but the first time it was in a other committee, is a committee on victim assistance. So as I said before, we would like to share our experience in pushing and driving the gender responsive approach in our endeavor. So it means that we would like to, I would say, complement and make the security issue to be more people centric, and especially in preparing to the Live conference in Siem Reap this November. What Thailand try to do is we would like to not only see the increase in number of women, but we would like also to see the significant load that could be more visible in international endeavor and also at national endeavor. That would be all for me. Thank you, Renata.
Thank you so much, Atikan. I took note of so many things, but I think, one interesting aspect that came through everything you told me, I feel is like disarmament is not only about the weapons, it's about the people, and gender is a lens to look at people's needs and people's different rights, opportunities, and the fact, that Thailand has these normative guidelines supporting women's equality. That's very important, because commitment from the leadership, we see it makes a difference. And we always see Thailand very active in different arms control fora. As you mentioned, the Landmine Ban Convention is happening in Cambodia, the review conference later this year. So I get an opportunity for the Asia Pacific region to be at the driving seat of developments in arms control and disarmament. But thank you so much. We will hear from you, I guess, later in the Q&A as well. Now I would like to move to our second speaker, Mr. Christopher Asa, who is Director General, Social Policy and Governance Department in Papua New Guinea. And Mr. Asa, it would be great if you could share with us about Papua New Guinea experience in working to reduce armed violence, especially violence against women facilitated by weapons. So in your view, can you share with us, what you think it works and what doesn't work in this area?
All right, thank you everyone. Thank you, Renata and Ida and all the participants. Can you hear me clearly? Okay. But just I'll give a background first, and then I think women play a significant part in this as well. But I just want to paint a picture of where we are. We've done some work. We've done some work as a government previously in, I think, 2005. We recognized the importance of addressing proliferation of weapons in country. We're not only challenged with factory-made weapons, but also illicit manufactures that today has been a weapon of choice for most criminal activities, for most urban centers where the availability of factory-made weapons are limited. Also, on the outset, I'd like to state here that we do have sporadic cross-border trafficking, but most of the weapons have come from legal stocks from within. That's what we know. Also, most of the weapons that have been confiscated from those that have used in the commission of crimes. We are challenged also with court exhibits going missing and those weapons being recirculated in the communities and have been reapplied and reused. So those are some of our challenges. Other things that are important to address this issue is the ability to collect data. We challenge with data collection and then obviously disaggregate data. And then obviously also those weapons have different motivations with different multitude of players across the communities. Take, for example, in the cities, if weapons get in the hands of criminal elements, it's mostly to do with criminal activities. For others, those weapons are transported illegally, trafficked up into the highlands of Papua New Guinea, where most of the tribal confrontations are experienced. What I mean by tribal confrontations, it's not only limited to land tenure or long-standing tribal differences and conflicts. It is now also evolved into politics, elections, and for representatives getting to our national parliament. The weapons have now played a significant part, and it has also now challenged the authority of government to continue to police and to try to conduct free and fair elections so that people are elected obviously democratically to represent their people in the national parliament. There are reports of areas where security forces are outnumbered and outgunned, where tribal men retain most of the weapons and dictate voting, if you may. So, but the issue of proliferation of small arms and light weapons is not only limited to commissioning of crime, but extends into electoral violence. Some of this, I think, is widely published after our last election. There were continuous, courts of disputed returns where the application of firearms were quite predominant. And obviously, on another note, those weapons are also now used for commercial purposes in terms of dictating, if not, presenting objection to resource developments. An issue standing for this year as well, and has been long-standing, is the issue of a mine up in the islands called Pogra mine that we're challenged with. Multinational corporations are also now assisting in helping security to look into these matters. So that's just a background to what we have on hand and the challenges that we face. And I think I've worked with IDA and our office over there and UN also. I think we're engaging on the Salient program now to try to address this challenge. It's not only a challenge that is but it all impacts on the communities and the people in the communities, but also extends into business opportunities, and all of that, and it also denies much needed government services to most of our communities. So those are challenges that we have. In terms specifically dealing with women and the application of weapons in regards to women, we have disaggregate data. I've pulled some things together from our health survey, demographic health survey, that gives a few statistics. I've got here about 56% of women between the ages of 15 to 49 have experienced some form of violence, and 28% most probably is sexual violence. 18% have experienced violence during pregnancy, and 63% of married women between 15 to 49 have experienced spousal, physical, sexual, emotional violence at some point or another during the course of the marriages in their life. But from statistics from our hospitals as of 2018, between 2018 and 2020, there's been treatment of over 18,759 sexual violence cases against women. So it is not an issue that is limited only to those that are most predominantly interested in owning and using firearms, but our women have been subject to violence as well. And in recognizing that, and in making efforts and striving to get efforts done to address violence against our women and children, particularly. So we've the national government, we've adopted what is called a Indian National Strategy on Gender-Based Violence for 2016 to 2025. The main objectives are to ensure that our women are protected, and that the efforts under the gender-based violence strategy are also captured within our development aspirations. So it's particularly dealing with our medium-term development plans, our development strategic plan, and obviously our aspiration under our Vision 2050 that the GBV Secretariat is captured, and the work of the Gender-Based Violence Committee is captured under our development aspirations. Secondly, also that under that committee, we push to get reliable data and aggregate data so that it helps to inform on strategies going forward. And obviously also that this committee and the efforts under this committee is sustainable in the long term. Based on that, we've also established a parliamentary committee on gender-based violence. That is in operation. They've had out 2 reports. You can check that on the website, Papua New Guinea Parliament, and then you can go to the Parliamentary Committee on Gender-Based Violence, and you can have a view of 2 of those reports. Challenge is having those reports implemented as well. So we've pulled together a committee of members from different departments that sit in this committee and work towards ensuring that recommendations from our Special Parliamentary Committee on Gender-Based Violence is implemented. Apart from that, we've got numerous other laws, legislations that are in play that protects women, obviously beginning with our national constitution and its preamble for equality for all, obviously with our medium-term development plans or strategic plan. And also we have what is called a Family Protection Act. And then for children, we have what is called a Lookout in Piginini policy. That's in Pidgin. It basically says Protection over Children Act. So we have that in play. And then obviously one of the problems that we have here in Papua New Guinea is socially accused related violence. And people believe in that, and they tend to all too often, women are victims of this. So we've instituted an act and a national action plan to look at sorcery accused related violence as well. So those are in play, and we hope going forward that this committee gets to implement those recommendations. But thankfully as well, as of last year we launched our medium-term development plan. Those aspirations are captured in the medium-term development plan that obviously influences and dictates on the national budget. So should have funding to assist in going forward. So those are some of the things we've done. But in terms of conflict arena, I mean, the experiences we have in Bougainville, women are key makers and peace builders as well. I've worked tirelessly in that arena as well. Immediately after the civil conflict, and the peace was broken on the back of women. So, and I think predominantly why this was so is because the society over there is a matrilineal society. Land and every other thing are owned by women, and they respect that. And the men have, I think, for us all, I would say, we have a greater love and respect for our mothers. And so they were key negotiators, and they were key at the background, not at the front, where discussions are being held, but they influence significantly on their children that were combatants and ex-combatants, and those that were participating in dialogue on finding a solution. Women have what we've seen is women are quite influential and can champion, peace building and peaceful efforts in our communities. So that was one of the biggest, and we continue to engage them, and they continue to be a part of this. I think if you look at their national House of Representatives, they've got more representatives of females in that house than at the national parliament. I'll take any other questions from this. I think there's more to say, but I mean, we're so diverse and rich in cultures and customs that application of one strategy is quite a challenge right across, but we tailor as we go. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Renata.
Thank you very much, Mr. Asa. This was super interesting to learn more about the context. And I think, understanding the problem with solid data and analysis is the first step to crafting, the policy interventions that are needed. So it looks like PNG is doing that. And as you said, implementation is a challenge. And I think that's a challenge across regions. But we should continue to work towards reducing armed violence. So thank you so much for your input. And I know it's late on your side, so also really appreciate your commitment and your willingness to be here with us today. Now I would like to turn to our third speaker, Mr. Pete Soria from the Philippines. Pete Soria is a senior advisor at the Office of the Special Envoy on Transnational Crime. And yes, I know you have some slides. We would like to hear from you, especially if you can elaborate on the role of technical experts in implementing arms control measures in a way that advance gender equality. And if you have any best practices to share from the Philippines, we would love to learn more about it. Mr. Pete Soria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant day to everyone. Thank you for inviting the Philippines to share its perspective and experience on ensuring that gender mainstreaming and remain a priority in implementing its domestic laws with due consideration to its multilateral arms control obligations. The Philippine government recognizes that arms control and gender equality are interconnected and mutually reinforcing goals. Recognizing the importance of these issues in ensuring peace, security, and social justice, the Philippine government has implemented various policies, initiatives, and collaborations aimed at promoting responsible arms control measures and advancing gender equality across the nation. The presentation will delve into the Philippine government's initiatives regarding arms control and gender equality, which will include exploring the Philippine government's role in implementing arms control measures, analyzing how these measures contribute to advancing gender equality, highlighting best practices in arms control and prevention of gender-based violence. In the Philippines, the ownership of a firearm is a statutory right, not a constitutional right. Our national framework on weapons regulation is mainly composed of 3 laws. Republic Act number 10591, or the Comprehensive Firearms and Ammunition Regulations Act. Republic Act number 10697, or the Strategic Trade Management Act, which involves the application of trade controls to propose exports, imports, brokering, transit, or transshipment of strategic items to include SALWs. Republic Act 10863, or the Customs Management and Tariff Act, which prohibits dynamite, gunpowder, ammunition, and other explosives, firearms and weapons of war, and detached parts thereof, except when authorized by law. Further, the Philippines has identified the synergy of the UN Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons with other international frameworks and instruments like the Arms Trade Treaty, which the Philippines ratified in 2022, Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, and Convention on Cluster Munitions, Firearms Control of the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, Sustainable Development Goals, and Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. By committing to these international frameworks, the government demonstrates its dedication to promote global peace and security through multilateral cooperation and adherence to common standards. Linking arms control to gender equality in the Philippines is crucial for promoting comprehensive peace, security, and social justice. I would like to highlight that the Philippines has committed to an ongoing peace process in Southern Philippines, which strives to be gender responsive and comprehensive as well. Some key points highlighting the connections between arms control measures and gender equality efforts in the Philippines are differentiated impact on women and vulnerable groups. We all know that women often bear the brunt of armed conflict and violence, facing risks of sexual violence, displacement, and loss of livelihood. Integrating gender perspectives into arms control measures helps recognize and address the specific needs, vulnerabilities, experiences of women and marginalized populations affected by armed violence. Empowering women in decision-making, women's perspectives and experiences bring valuable insights to the design, implementation, and evaluation of arms control measures. Engaging women in decision-making processes related to arms control fosters inclusivity, diversity, and accountability in policymaking and governance structures. Preventing gender-based violence, promoting peace and security, and advancing sustainable development goals. By recognizing the interconnections between arms control measures and gender dynamics, the Philippines has developed more effective and responsive policies and programs that address the diverse needs and experiences of its population. Women play a crucial role in promoting arms control measures and fostering peace and security in the Philippines. Their participation and contributions are instrumental in shaping effective policies and programs that address the challenges of armed conflict and violence. Involvement of women in arms control, women's representation in decision-making bodies. Women are increasingly represented in key decision-making bodies and institutions involved in arms control initiatives in the Philippines. For example, the Strategic Trade Management Office is headed by a woman with women division chiefs. Efforts have been made to ensure gender balance and diversity in committees, working groups, and task forces responsible for developing and implementing arms control policies and strategies. Advocacy and awareness raising. Women-led organizations and civil society groups actively engage in advocacy and awareness-raising campaigns to promote arms control and disarmament. These initiatives aim to mobilize public support, raise awareness about the impact of armed violence on women and communities, and promote the importance of peaceful conflict resolution. Participation in peace building and conflict resolution. Women play pivotal roles in peace building and conflict resolution efforts, advocating for nonviolent approaches to addressing disputes and grievances. Women grassroots organizations and peace networks work to build bridges between conflicting parties, facilitate dialogue and reconciliation processes, and promote community-driven solutions to conflict. Programs and initiatives promoting women's participation. Women in Peace and Security Agenda. The Philippine government has embraced the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, which recognizes the critical role of women in conflict prevention, peace building, and post-conflict reconstruction. National action plans and policies on WPS provide frameworks for promoting women's participation in arms control and peace building initiatives. The Philippines has recently launched its fourth iteration of the National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, covering 2023 to 2033, which provides for strengthening gender responsive initiatives to address the proliferation of child abuse, including within the context of peace agreements. Capacity building and leadership development. Programs and initiatives aimed at building women's capacity and leadership skills in arms control and peace building have been implemented. Training, workshops, seminars, and mentorship programs empower women to actively engage in decision-making processes, advocate for policy changes, and contribute to building inclusive and resilient communities. While the Philippine government is committed to promoting gender-responsive arms control measures, several challenges hinder the effective implementation of such initiatives. Some of the challenges faced: cultural norms and stereotypes. There is still deep-rooted cultural norms and gender stereotypes that perpetuate traditional roles and expectations, limiting women's participation in arms control decision-making processes. Lack of gender-sensitive data and analysis. There is still a limited availability of gender disaggregated data and analysis, which poses challenges in understanding the differentiated impact of armed violence on men, women, and gender-diverse individuals. Institutional capacity and resources. Institutional capacity and resources still needs to be improved so as not to hinder the Philippine government's ability to mainstream gender perspectives into arms control policies and practices. Limited women's participation and representation. There are still aspects of government leadership where women remain underrepresented in decision-making bodies and leadership positions within arms control institutions, perpetuating gender imbalances in policy formulation and implementation. Strategies for overcoming challenges. Gender mainstreaming. Integrate gender considerations into all aspects of arms control policies, programs, and practices. Capacity building and training. Provide training and capacity building opportunities for government officials, policymakers, and civil society actors on gender-sensitive approaches to arms control and conflict resolution. Stakeholder engagement and collaboration fosters partnership and collaboration among government agencies, civil society organizations, academia, and international partners to share knowledge, resources, and best practices in gender-inclusive arms control. Advocacy and awareness raising. Conduct advocacy campaigns and awareness-raising activities to promote the importance of gender equality in arms control and to mobilize support for gender-inclusive policies and programs. The Philippine government has implemented several successful initiatives in the areas of arms control and prevention of gender-based violence. comprehensive firearms regulation. The legislation we have 4 or 3 legislations here, and the legislation has contributed to reducing illegal arms proliferation and enhancing public safety and security across the country. The Arms Trade Treaty Assessment Criteria is already embedded in our domestic law, and it's implementing rules and regulations to cover proposed exports, imports, brokering, transit, or transshipment of strategic trade items, including SALWs. International commitments and cooperation. By adhering to global standards and fostering international cooperation, the Philippines strengthens its capacity to combat illicit arms trafficking and promote regional stability. On best practices in gender-based violence prevention, special laws recognizing women's rights and protection from all forms of abuses. The legislation empower law enforcement agencies and courts to hold perpetrators accountable and ensure access to justice for survivors. This includes the Magna Carta of Women, or Republic Act number 9710, which emphasizes setting aside a gender development budget equivalent to a minimum of 5% of the agency's total budget. It also includes the incremental increase in the recruitment and training of women in government services that cater to women victims of gender-related offenses. There is also a 20% quota for incoming recruitment of the armed services. Additionally, the Philippine Commission on Women was established under this law in 2009. It is vice chair of the National Steering Committee on WPS. Gender sensitivity training and capacity building. Government agencies and civil society organizations conduct gender sensitivity training and capacity building programs for law enforcement officers, social workers, healthcare providers, and other frontline responders. On the success stories and positive outcomes. We have seen a decrease in firearms-related crimes. Strengthened enforcement measures and public awareness campaigns have helped mitigate the risks associated with illegal firearms possession and misuse. The passage of laws led to increased reporting of gender-based violence cases and improved access to support services for survivors. Survivors feel more empowered to seek help and pursue legal remedies, leading to greater accountability for perpetrators and enhanced protection for vulnerable individuals. The whole-of-nation approach. Unique to the Philippines is the existence of an office that serves as the national focal point for the UN PoA. That office is the Office of the Special Envoy on Transnational Crime, which is under the Office of the President. It also oversees the Philippine Center on Transnational Crime. It has the mandate to represent the Philippine government in regional and international fora that deal with transnational crime, as well as serve as the focal point for coordinating, integrating, and evaluating the efforts of law enforcement and other government agencies involved in the campaign against transnational crime. In particular, the draft National Action Plan on SALW, which is being developed by the Philippines, the draft includes an annex on gender-based action plans. As the Philippines continues its journey towards promoting arms control and gender equality, future plans and strategies aim to further integrate gender perspective into arms control efforts. These initiatives will strengthen the country's commitment to peace, security, and social justice. Integration of gender perspectives in arms control. Gender-responsive policy formulation. This includes conducting gender-sensitive analysis, incorporating gender indicators, and ensuring women's representation in decision-making processes as outlined in the Gender-Based Action Plan of the NAP on SALW. Capacity building and training. Enhanced capacity building and training programs will be developed to equip government officials, law enforcement agencies, and civil society organizations with the knowledge and skills to integrate gender considerations into arms control initiatives. In strengthening institutional mechanisms, Future strategies aim to strengthen institutional mechanisms and coordination mechanisms for gender-inclusive arms control. The NAC on WPS, its implementation is ongoing and outlines specific objectives, activities, and indicators to promote gender equality and women's empowerment in the context of peace and security. New initiatives will focus on developing and implementing gender-responsive arms control measures that address the specific needs and vulnerabilities of women, men, and gender-diverse individuals. The Philippine government is committed to integrating gender perspectives into arms control policies and programs. This reflects its dedication to promote peace, security, and gender equality by empowering women, addressing root causes of gender-based violence, and promoting a culture of peace. The Philippines aims to create a more inclusive and equitable society for all its citizens. Thank you for your attention. Together, let us continue to work towards a world free from the threats of armed violence and gender-based discrimination.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soria, for this comprehensive presentation. Wow, it seems like the Philippines is doing a lot, and I was very interested, especially in the success stories. So maybe we'll follow up with your office afterwards, because this is the kind of thing, you know, that at UNIDIR would like to study and showcase and you know, demonstrate that a gender responsive approach actually leads to better results for everyone. So thank you very much for that. Now I would like to turn to our next speaker, Major Upal, who is in India joining us. And she is an armament training officer with the Indian Army. And she will tell us a bit how security institutions such as the military contribute to gender equality and the prevention of GBV. So Major Upal, the floor is yours.
Distinguished fellow panelists, delegates from the Asia and Indo-Pacific regions, members of the UNRCPD, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Renata, for the kind introduction. It's a privilege to be a part of this esteemed dialogue and to be able to share my thoughts and my personal experiences on the topic fostering gender-responsive arms control, and importantly on the question that is posed by the moderator. How can security institutions such as the military contribute to gender equality and the prevention of gender-based violence? Firstly, I would like to talk about military. The core ideas of military include ethics, values, morals, which translate to, most importantly, respect. It is a part of the military way of life to have respect for everyone, including the adversary and especially women. The Indian soil has borne many brave women warriors, may it be Rani Durgavati or Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, who refused to surrender and fought fearlessly. They have inspired many soldiers, including both men and women. The women were inducted in the Indian Armed Forces since 1888, and they have been part of various wars. Kalyani Sen was the first woman to be part of the Second World War. Noor Inayat Khan was secretly deployed in German-occupied France, and she was also awarded George Cross posthumously. In 1976, Gertrude Alice Ram, who was a military nurse, became the first woman officer to attain the rank of a Major General. Now coming to the present times, Punita Arora is the first woman in India to become a Lieutenant General of the Indian Armed Forces and a Vice Admiral of the Indian Navy. Padmavati Bandyopadhyay is the first woman Air Marshal of the Indian Air Force. And Major Suman Gavani was the first Indian to become the UN Military Gender Advocate for the year 2019. All these women have broken barriers and they have paved a path for other women in uniform to achieve even greater heights. We also have the privilege of two distinguished women who have become our presidents of the country, including the current incumbent, Her Excellency Srimati Draupadi Murmu, and thus becoming the Supreme Commander of the armed forces of the Republic of India. Also, we have two accomplished women, late Srimati Indira Gandhi and Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, currently our finance minister, who have been our defense ministers and have been highly acclaimed for their contribution. This flows into the outlook where India has enacted 33% reservation in our parliament for women, which is the highest guaranteed representation compared to any other country. Girls have now been inducted into the cradle of leadership, that is the National Defense Academy, which was established way back in 1949. Women in military train along with their male counterparts as one team. They are judged on the same criteria, they are given the same rank and have the same pay structure. Women are serving shoulder to shoulder in all combat support arms and have also now been inducted in the soldier rank as Agniveers or the fire warriors. In April 2023, 5 women were commissioned in the Corps of Artillery, which is a fighting arm, which has opened the doors to many women to command fighting formations in the forward areas. We have squadron leader Avni Chaturvedi, who is the first fighter woman pilot to fly a supersonic jet and lead a Sukhoi 30 detachment overseas. We have the all-women crew from Indian Navy who circumnavigated across the globe. Also, the all-women team from Indian Army who have scaled the Mount Everest. Commander Prerna Diosthali created history when the Indian Navy appointed her to command INS warship Trincut. She is the first woman officer of the Indian Navy to command a warship. In a first, women officer in the Indian Air Force was selected in 2023 to take charge of the front-line combat units. Group Captain Shelja Dhami has been chosen to lead a missile squadron in the Western sector. In the Indian Army, women have now been given command of ammunition echelons in forward areas. These are the ongoing efforts to expand the role of women and to give them combat appointments, which is one of the several steps which are taken towards gender equality. The Indian Air Force and Navy have also opened doors for women in the Special Forces, the Garud Commando Force, and the Marine Commando Force, respectively. Gender equality first starts in the mind and then replicates into actions. Therefore, the male officers in our military are conditioned to treat their female counterparts as equals. There is no disparity in posting of women to varied terrains, including the highest battlefield in the country. Women are given equal opportunity to achieve, to grow, and compete. I have had the privilege to serve in a high altitude area in the Himalayas, where the temperatures drop down to minus 45 degrees Celsius during the winters. And to share with you, there was a time when I was the only woman officer in the entire area. When I would go out for my routine checks in the village, I was greeted with smiles, especially from young girls who would look up to me with glittering eyes. I also mentored a couple of them who later joined the forces. Many asked me, how was my experience? What were the challenges that I faced? Did I ever face any gender bias? To which my response was, the world will see you how you see yourself. When a woman sets an example, she forces many men to change their age-old mindset. In that span of 2 years, I saw the attitude of my men change to looking at me just as a woman, to looking at me as their leader. Although the world has progressed and women are no longer restricted to their only role as caretakers and childbearers, however, there is still a major part of the globe where the women are deprived of the basic rights of education, health, financial independence, as most importantly, happiness. Gender equality aims at providing an environment where these women can attain a position when they can decide how they want to lead their lives. The Indian Army also provides an opportunity to the Veer Naris that is the war widows, to join the military and empower them to take care of their families independently. When a woman in uniform walks into a conflict area, she brings in trust and comfort. Imagine living in a home where sexual abuse is accepted. It's a normal thing within the family, where crimes go unreported. Women are forced to live in the evils of conflict-related sexual violence. Seeing a woman in uniform can be a ray of light in this darkness and bring about a hope for change. Security institutions such as the military can help to provide gender equality and prevent gender-based violence by reaching out to those victims who are in these conflict areas and are being subjected to the conflict-related sexual violence. We can help them to frame the future of the girl child that they would bring into that very same society. I have served as a military observer in a Red Team site in MONUSCO, and I've seen the condition of the women and children who don't know their rights. Many of them even suffered from diseases which were related to the sexual exploitation that they faced. They were even devoid of the basic medical facilities. While carrying out the foot, vehicle, and helicopter patrols, when I reached out to women in remote areas and interacted with them, I realized that many of them were not comfortable in sharing their horrified experiences with my male colleagues in the mission. When I walk up to a woman, it takes me a minute to establish that connect, and the feeling is likewise, because a woman is a woman, irrespective of her caste, creed, color, or religion. To further dwell upon this mindset, India was the first country to send an all-woman police team in the UN mission in Liberia, and later sent a female engagement team in MONUSCO. Seeing these women in uniform inspired many local women to join security and police forces. My own security guard was a young lady, and she was equally competent. Increasing the representation of women in security institutions has led to a more gender-sensitive approach towards security. Prevention of gender-based violence can only be achieved when we train the men in our society to treat women with respect, to give them equal opportunities and access to life. And moreover, when we empower our women, make them aware of their own rights, and give them a support system so that they can achieve what they are worth. The picture.
Help. Continue.
Okay, there is a picture that was taken 365 days back during the Turkey earthquake, which speaks volumes. Alongside being leaders and achievers, women are also healers. In the end, I would like to say that I myself, the mother of a girl child, and I'm nurturing her to change the society. I leave you all with a thought: be the change you want to see. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Major Upal, for sharing these facts, figures, also your experience in the military. I think I found it really interesting, and I'm sure the others found it as well. Thank you very much. Now I would like to turn to our final speaker of the panel, and it is Ms. Purna Shobhachitrakar, coordinator of Ban Landmines Campaign Nepal. And Purna will share with us some thoughts on this topic, but I would just like to make an announcement that I think we're going to be staying around 10 minutes more than we initially anticipated. So we'll have time for a brief exchange. And so also, so Purna can share her thoughts also, because we are running a bit longer than expected. But Purna, reflecting on the journey of gender responsive small arms control in the region, as we have seen and heard from so many speakers today, could you share with us, what you think were the main successes that have been achieved so far, and what is still left to be done? How can we further advance this agenda? You are on mute, Purna. Do you think you can unmute yourself? Yes, I think now.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of experience on small arms. The NCBL, our organizations, work some activities during the conflict to reduce the armed violence and impact of armed violence in the conflict period. So I pick up some points. It is not long, so I think it will be better to read quickly, and we can save our time. So in society, men are commonly viewed as the primary actors when it comes to carrying and using large or small weapons. This perception is supported by data from conflict and weapon use in Nepal, where men are predominantly the primary aggressors. However, Nepal's 10-year armed conflict demonstrates that if women are equally motivated on influence, they are just as capable as men in producing, using, and carrying weapons. Thus, we have witnessed, especially in Nepal, women partake in conflict by providing food, securing weapons, and assisting in transportation. They are in conflict with weapons equally as men, but the effect of those weapons are different amongst men, women, and children. Men are typically more directly affected, whereas women often experience indirect and long-term effects. Additionally, women who became supporters of conflicting parties, either directly or indirectly, were often subjected to rape or murder by one side or the other. Today, the illicit and uncontrolled production, transportation, and storage of small weapons are increasingly rampant internationally, leading to insecurity, fear, and terror affecting both urban and rural population. This phenomenon hampers development, erodes human spirit, and fosters chaos, causing death and destruction during both wartime and peacetime. Efforts led by the UN, governments, and civil society worldwide aim to reduce the possession of illegal small arms and prevent human losses. As an experienced party in minimizing the impact of small arms, NCBL believes that addressing gender responsibility in small arms control necessitates examining it from three levels: the impact of small arms use on men, women, and other communities, the rehabilitation efforts provided by governments and other agencies for those affected by violence, and the status of access to economic reintegration and leadership role in small arms control. The uncontrolled trade of small arms not only violate the law, but also facilitates their illegal uses among the general population, significantly impacting public safety. And it is evident that women constituting 50% of society should equally participate in controlling the small arms trade, facilitating efforts to combat violence against them. And in the conflict time, rural or urban area, we found some evidence that women are more vulnerable from the conflict and use of small arms. That cause rape and gang gang rape. In incident of assault, poor, Dalit, indigenous, and rural women are most vulnerable since they are prevented from exercising their rights due to lack of access to law and court. Single women are prime targets for armed robbery and assault and are thus particularly vulnerable. Threat of forceful donations. Armed groups terrorize women when they cannot get donation from their male partners. There are challenges for women to work in Tarai, especially as journalists. The killing of Miss Uma Singh and Tika Bista proved that the danger there is legitimate. Violence on shelters of the opposing force. Women, being the sole caretakers of houses, are frequently the only people staying in their house. When asked for, they cannot refuse the armed groups a shelter. Other groups come to ask then if they have sheltered anyone and threaten them with death if they are hiding people. Violence against youth and children. Due to the lack of control of small arms, youth are forcibly abducted during the conflict and are made to join the conflict, produce improvised weapons, collect not only exported from other countries, but they themselves produce small arms, collect forceful donation and become involved in other violent activities. This impact remains as a problem of society for a long period after the end of the conflict. Even during the peacetime, the availability of cheap illicit weapons fostered the creation of gangs, and this in turn create a dynamic where youth are brought into the whole either willingly or by force. The lack of control of small arms has a wide impact on children as well. Children are forced to join the conflict by force, to transfer arms from one place to another place, to carry and to communicate information of the opposing party, etc. They have to face challenges in their education, health, and other fields. As with young people, the effect of violence on them can last for a long time. These young people and children, especially women and girls, are victims of sexual violence and exploitation. Violence against senior citizens. I separate these senior citizen topics because they have less strength and they have lack of funding. They have to be dependent to others. So they may have different type of problems when the conflict happened, when the massive use of small arms. So I put it in different paragraph. Small arms and conflict also have an effect on elderly citizens. They may be forced to face challenges such as having their children or grandchildren kidnapped while providing shelter and food to the respective parties, providing information, being forced to support one or the other political ideology, and not being able to raise their voice against violence committed against them. Challenges to stop armed violence. The government is not yet party to the ATT.
Putna, are you there? From my side, it looks like you froze. Yes.
Among political parties and a national authority for planning and action, unstable political system, and frequent change of government, lack of rule, law, and order. Armed groups who have come in for negotiation are not fulfilling their commitments and continue to engage in armed violence to fund their organization. Lack of awareness of the people, parliamentarians being more concerned about their vote politics rather than people's welfare. Escalation of corruption and lack of good governance. Then fostering gender responsive small arm control. This is in political and legal solution. Governments should continue to advocate for entry into force, into ATT. Accomplishment of this step also helps to formulate laws for the country. There is a national law also against different type of law against arm use and explosive use, transport and store, but it is not enough to control this type of arm. Advocacy should be continued with governments to regularize voluntary reporting as directed by the programs of actions, POA. Countries that have become party to treaty agreements must insist on implementing its provisions. It should be understood that international humanitarian law is weak if the regulatory aspect of arms control is weak. Women Rights Charter, Women Peace and Security 1325, 1820, various conventions such as MBT, CCM, CCW, UNCRPD, SDG 5 and 16 16C can also play a role in small arms control to some extent. Keeping in mind the possibility of illegal arms trade, especially monitoring and control methods should be adopted in the border area. Peace and security within the country should be guaranteed. Human rights should be protected and impunity should be ended. Violence statistics should be properly updated, including gender identification, separate types of violence against women with small arms should also be identified and included in the statistics. The leadership of women should be encouraged to ensure their rights. The capacity of women should be enhanced through training and participation. Families should also give an awareness and training to highlight women's power and role of women. Justice to women, social and economic empowerment of women can be one solution. Failure to control the trade in small arms affects different communities or genders in the society in different ways. Those who are most at risk can be made more responsible for controlling small arms through justice, as well as their social and economic empowerment. In order for its fruition, proper plans need to be drawn and the budget needs to be managed properly. The subject of gender responsibilities should be linked with other subjects as well. Civil society organizations should act as a bridge between the communities and the government. Inclusive society, advocacy for an inclusive society and the empowerment of that society should be advocated, where people from all sides, communities, classes, and levels are involved in discussion as well as planning and implementing solutions. Political stability, peace, and promote non-violence culture. There should be a feeling that it is the duty of each country to develop political stability within the country, common views of political parties on common issue, and to solve the challenges of the disorderly and the uncontrolled trade in arms. In this, the unity of women should be strengthened. Commitment for good governance and fight against corruption in order to reduce the growing corruption and the growing fascination with weapons, especially illicit weapons. It is necessary to develop a commitment to fight against corruption and establish good governance. From this, women and other communities at risk will be able to benefit more. Thank you very much for listening me.
Thank you, Purna, for coming prepared
I took
with
very
all
few
this.
time.
Yeah, with all this list of things that still remains to be done. That was the question we had for you. So thank you very much for highlighting all these necessary actions, as well as the importance of an inclusive approach that takes into consideration civil society perspectives. We are already past time. I saw the chat has been very active. I'm happy to see that, people asking questions and other people, responding. So just to make a brief summary of what's going on in the chat, we've seen questions about how do you collect gender disaggregated data about gendered impacts or women involvement in armed conflict? So Ida shared a list of possible sources, examples of gender disaggregated data. We will be producing a summary of this meeting, and we can reflect the questions that have been in the chat in the summary, and we'll share with everyone for email, via email as well. And the same goes for the recording. The event is being recorded and it will be available at the UNIDIR YouTube channel. So I would just like to say thanks again for everybody that joined today. I think, this shows the richness of each national experience, and we really appreciate having this fora for engaging with different countries in the Asia Pacific region. From our side at UNIDIR, we are doing these regional briefings, and we are going to do with all UN regional groups on the same topic, gender, the POA and the ATT. So Asia Pacific was our first. We will meet with the African group on 8 March, the International Women's Day. And then we will proceed with other regions in the following months as well. So yes, from my side, a big thank you to everyone who joined. Stay on the lookout for the summary of the event, the recording of the event. We will also be sharing via chat here a feedback form. So you can tell us what you thought about this event, what can we do better. We really welcome your feedback as well. And now to conclude, I'd like to hand over to my colleague from UNRCPD, to Ida, for our final remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Renata, and thank you so much to our esteemed panel. I mean, I was very pleased to hear such an inspiring story and experience from different panelists. But before we close, I actually would like maybe to ask the Indian delegation if they would like to answer a specific question that was posed in the chat box. Before we close, I received several messages that I would like to hear from you. So if you can indulge with us, we can maybe have 5 minutes and we can give you the floor. But you are on mute.
Thank you, Ida. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Firstly, thank you very much. It was a great workshop and great interaction. Before we answer the question, let me just tell you that the permanent representative of the UN from India is a woman. Our head of delegation at the PrepCom at the moment in New York is a woman. The boss of the Disarmament and International Security Affairs at Ministry of External Affairs, which looks after SALW, is a woman. All the 3 reps that you see here, Army, Navy, Air Force, are obviously women. And in fact, both the men sitting here also married to women officers of the Indian Armed Forces. So we couldn't have got a better delegation for you as a part of the panel here. We must also tell you that we work with the ASEAN Regional Forum and the WPS members there. One of the points that was brought out earlier, I thought I just mentioned that. We could have also got our police, Coast Guard, and border security force women here in the panel. But as the question posed to us was very military, we decided to tackle it that way. With that background, let me just hand you over to Major Apeksha to handle the question that was asked and also make India's commitment from Group Captain Srihari from MOD, who will make our commitment to certain training processes.
Okay, there was a question by Mona Lisa from CIPRI. She was asking about some professional avenues of engagement at national level and early career in SALW with those who do not have a military background. She was asking for recommendations of women who are interested in technical aspect of WAM. So to answer this, I would say that as of now in India, we do not have any civil agency who's dealing with training on small arms and light weapons. It is only the military institutes who are empowered and they have the expertise to carry on the training. Also, there are many ex-military officers with a military background who have now been part of various positions wherein they are imparting this kind of training. In fact, there was a meeting which was held in Geneva. So one of our women ATOs, Lieutenant Colonel Preeti Kanwar, was a part of that meeting, and she shared her experiences and best practices as a woman ATO. And the response was very good. So there's also another meeting that I've come to know that is being organized in Austria. So as of now, it's just that we don't have anything in civil, sorry. And I'll hand over to Group Captain Srihari.
So I'd just like to add on that all our SALW training and auditing takes place by our defense forces and our police forces. So there are no civilians involved. And whenever there's an application for a weapon, Whether it is a man or a woman, it's gender neutral. The training will be carried out by the police or the defense before they're given their weapon to handle. And all the auditing is also done by these two agencies. So there is no civil agency. To make our commitment, I'll hand you over to Group Captain Srihari.
Hi, distinguished delegates and the organizers. Thank you very much for a wonderful experience today, listening to all the delegates. Briefly, I'd like to say that, India has got tremendous amount of expertise, especially women who are handling affairs like Commodore Nitin and Major Upal brought out. We have a huge pool of talent who are completely hands-on with the issue of armament management, weapons control issues, all that stuff. We're happy to share our best practice and national initiatives. We're happy to take on certain training programs in association with the UNRCPD and UNIDIR and under the umbrella of the United Nations. And we would like to see people cooperating with us in this area so that we can foster a environment of peace and prosperity in the issue of illicit small arms and light weapons. Like Commodore Nitin brought up, we also have people from Assam Rifles, border guards, and the customs and so on and so forth. We would bring in the complete range of expertise available in India. And for all those who want to join us, we are most happy to contribute. Like I said, I'll just like to conclude on a lighter note to say that, there were days when we say that, behind every successful man, there was a woman. But these days, I think women are standing on their own right, and you can see two men flanking three very successful women here. So I'll rest my case here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to the Indian delegation for sharing the experience and their expertise on that. And I think now it's time to close. I would like to continue the discussion. I know that we also have other questions in the chat box. We already answered some of the questions. Actually, I think we covered pretty much the questions that were in the chat box. And as Renata mentioned, now we will compile the main takeaways in a short report or briefing, and that will be shared with you. I think, on a concluding note, we started talking about challenges, and I think we ended up talking about all progress that we have seen now in the region with regard to women participation in this field and gender mainstreaming small arms control. And I actually like also the idea to continue this kind of consultation. So maybe this is just the starting point. We can continue to have a more structured regional cooperation mechanism on the PoA implementation, but also focus on gender mainstreaming and enhancing women participation in this field. Before I close, I would like actually to update you on a few things that UNRCPD is doing. So as you all know, we are now wrapping up the main takeaways and lessons learned from the regional preparatory meeting in the lead up to the 4th review conference. Right now in New York, we have the preparatory committee for the 4th review conference started last Monday and will end this Friday. And I will keep you posted on the results, also the preparatory committee. I hope you all received my emails. I've been sending few emails and I hope I have all your email address. If not, please reach out to me so that I will make sure that you are in our mailing list. Also next week, we have another interesting online event on SDG 16.4.2, which is on the illicit flows of arms. This event will be conducted jointly with UNODC in the context of the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development Goals, which this year has a focus on SDG 16. I will start promote this event right after we close this meeting, so you will receive the email from my side, and I hope you can join, because as we mentioned today, one of the challenges that we have is data collection. So I hope that this meeting on SDG 16.4.2 can provide you with some elements to enhance data collection on illicit flows of arms. Also, next week I will be in Sri Lanka, so I look forward to seeing our distinguished participants, colleagues and friends from Sri Lanka. And then next, hopefully we will be able to go to Port Moresby in PNG. So just to say, the UNRCPD stands ready to support you with the PoA implementation, and do not hesitate to reach out to us. We have a standing project on the PoA implementation, and under the second pillar, we can provide targeted assistance at the national level. With that, I think I can stop here. Once again, thank you so much to our colleague from UNIDIR to co-host this event with us, and a big thank to our esteemed panelists. I really learned a lot from you, and I hope that we can continue this conversation moving forward. Thank you to all participants for your attention and participation, and please stay tuned. You will receive more information from our side. Thank you, and have a good afternoon or evening, rest of the day, wherever you are. Bye-bye.